I am Rabbi Nathan Davidovich, speaking to you on behalf of the Beersheba, speaking to you from Efrat, Israel. I'm going to discuss a little bit about this week's Torah reading. The Parsha is Vayetze, and it's an interesting story. And basically, what I'm going to be talking about is Jacob's dream of the ladder, and what we can learn from that in terms of increasing our self-esteem, and also how to deal with the materiality and the difficulties in this world, knowing that our souls come from heaven and are divine. The story starts, the Torah starts by telling us that Yaakov is following the commands of his parents to leave Beersheba in the land of Israel and go to their relative in the land of Haran, which is on the border between Iraq and Syria, I believe, and find a wife. And they said he should not take a wife from the inhabitants of Canaan. So that's why he was going there. Now, this was the very first time that Yaakov was leaving the Holy Land of Israel. So he's traveling along the way, and all of a sudden, not at its appropriate time, according to one commentary, the sun set, and he had to go to sleep because he couldn't travel. It was dark. So he stopped at that place, obviously, and he arranged stones around his head, actually stones around his body first to protect himself from animals, and then he fell asleep. And when he was sleeping, he had a dream. And the dream was that he saw a ladder extending from the ground all the way up to heaven. And on this ladder, he saw angels going up and coming down. And on top of the ladder, God was standing. So he woke up after having this dream, and he said, I see that God is in this place. The place that he had stopped actually was the very place that the Holy Beis Hamikdash would be built. It was in Jerusalem, where the Holy Temple would be built. He says, I didn't know this was such a holy place. Now, a little background. Yaakov had never left the land of Israel. He had lived only in a bubble, if you will, of holiness. He spent his whole life up until that point in Israel. He spent the last 14 years of his life when he was fleeing from Esav by studying Torah somewhere else in Israel with Shem and Ever. And now he was being asked to go outside of Israel. And it appeared as if there was a wall in front of him. He didn't know how he could surmount this wall because he didn't know how could he serve God in a place that wasn't holy. The way the sentences read is as follows. I actually basically gave you the translation about the ladder, and at the top of the ladder was God, and God said to him, I am the God of your father Abraham and Jacob and Isaac, and the land that you are laying upon, I will give it to you and your children, your descendants, and your descendants will be like the afar ha'oretz, like the dust of the earth. This sulam, this ladder, has great significance. And there are many, many commentaries on the ladder. The Nativot Shalom talks about the ladder, and he says basically the ladder represents the miskeret, the boundary by which a Jew can live in this world. And we have the option of either going up or coming down. And of course, you never know if you're on the ladder, if you see somebody below you or above you, you don't know if that person's going up or going down. Our job is to go up the ladder. And it's teaching us that we have the ability to do what God wants us to do. The key is to stay on the ladder. And when you're on a ladder, it's much safer to be moving. If you're standing still on a ladder, you can fall off. So we should always be moving, and we always be trying to move upwards. What Jacob understood from this message of the ladder is that, yes, it's easy and important to be in a land of holiness, but even when he leaves this land and goes to Haran, that he can still serve God, and God's promise that he will still be with him and bring him back to Israel. And that's the key, because up until that point, he had no idea. It was like a dividing wall. He had no idea how he could get over that wall, how he could keep being a good Jew in a land that was full of profane things, that wasn't full of holiness as the land of Israel is. So it taught him that. And he was, he left the land of Israel to go to find a wife. But he left with the promise that God would be with him and that he could still serve God in a place that isn't holy. He can bring holiness into it. The key is to stay on the ladder, to always be going up. There's an interesting comment that I saw from Rav Moshe Kobrin, one of the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, disciples of, I think, Pinchas of Koretz. He took the word, and we mentioned this word. The Pasuk says that God promised them that your seed shall be like the dust of the earth. And of course, the ladder itself was standing on the earth. And he says, where the Torah tells us, Vayachlom, and he dreamed, and he saw this ladder, he says, the he refers to everybody. Every person should know that, what am I? I am clay. I am made up of lots of pieces of clay and of dirt, but the top of it reached heaven, meaning my soul can reach heaven. And behold, the angels are going up and coming down. So the angels going up and coming down depend on my desires. If I want to bring myself to a higher place through the avenue of these angels, I have to work on that. I have to do that, but I can do it if I want to do it. It's said that the angels would actually go up and bring messages to God as to what's going on here, and God would say, okay, now do this, go down and do this. So the level we can reach depends on whether we're willing to climb that ladder and recognize. The key is that we should always recognize that even though we're down on the ground, we have a ladder we can climb up and we can reach the highest level. There's a child's book that was written in 1906, a story that I'm sure everybody has heard about the train. It was a railway station. There was a very heavy load that had to be drawn up to a heavy slope, and they couldn't. The director of the railway yard couldn't find anybody to do it. Any of the trains, they all had different reasons why I couldn't do it, and they found a brand new shiny train, and he kept saying, "Yes, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it." And he went up the train. When you could barely hear his voice at the end, went up, got to the top, and went down. The key is for us, we have to keep trying. If we keep trying, if we build our self-esteem, recognize that even though we're starting at the bottom, we may have fallen to a low place, we can reach the highest level. My blessing is to all of us that we work harder to reach that level on the ladder and to always stay within the boundary of the ladder to come closer to God. Thank you for listening on behalf of the webyeshiva.org. I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.